Well, here I am in front of an old building, and I found this one through a friend of mine. He's into bicycling and he cycles along all the old canals, and typically that's where you're going to find all the old buildings and old industrial areas. So as soon as I've been told that there was a location that my friend spotted, then I start to Google the location. And Google Maps, it's great. Take a satellite view on it, and then you can spot more or less what kind of factory it is. If you're really lucky, there are already some pictures of it. And then try to Google for more information of what did they do there, what was the type of industry, what were they producing. Now once you know that, then you know the very nature of that specific facility. Now if it's an industrial plant, then I recommend not to go shoot inside an industrial plant. There could be all kind of hazardous materials and chemical products that might not be that good for your health. So if it's a iron plant or a steel works or anything like that, then I'm very interested in, because that typically won't harm you as bad as what chemical stuff could do. Now, once you Googled it, then you know more or less the surroundings. If you don't see any cars or you don't see any tracks around the building, then you know it's kind of deserted. So you can take the chance to go over there and take a visual inspection of it. Now, I then do my scouting on site without my camera. Sometimes I take my smartphone with me and I'm looking for an entrance into the building. Now, don't break in, don't smash windows, don't do anything of that. If the door is open, try to get in. If there's a hole in the wall, crawl through the hole. That kind of things, but don't destroy anything, because at the end of the day, it is still somebody's property and you are still trespassing. If we like it or not, it's still trespassing. If there are signs, do not enter, do not trespass, private property, then I leave it alone and I'm trying to find the owner and ask for permission to get in. If there are no signs, I take my chances. I don't know why I'm so attracted to those buildings. It is probably because I'm doing something illegally. It's kind of challenging. You're entering a building that you don't know what you will expect. It's kind of an adventure. And it's also a bit dangerous if you do walk in those buildings. Watch out. Quite often they are in decay and roofs may come down, or there may be holes in the ground that you could fall into. Never walk on wood. And it's always better to take a second person with you. Now, once you're inside that building, it's good to look around, and if you remember what they were building, then try to follow the production process in the factory and walk your way through the factory that way. Mark the interesting spots and always remember your escape route, because that's what you're going to need eventually, your escape route. Now, once you've marked the interesting spots and the locations, then I just go back and I think about it. And in the day of the shoot, I go back to the factory, I park my car and I sneak in and I have my kit with me. And typically I only have two lenses with me. I have a 12-24 with me for my wide angle work, and I have a 24-70 with me. Both are 2.8, and that gives me enough of capabilities. I don't need a tele lens because my legs are my best tele lens. So that's all you need really on lenses. Now, in terms of camera, if you do have a camera with a wide dynamic range, then use it, because those places tend to be very dark. And if there are holes in the roof, then you get lots of light through that, but it's very local. And then you have too much of a difference between the darks and the bright lights. Then it's either blown out or the blacks are having no more detail. So you could, of course, take some shots with overexposure and underexposure and try to create some HDR out of it afterwards. If you like that. I am not too keen on HDR, but that's a personal taste. Anyhow, so I always take my D3S with me. It's an older camera, but it's great. I don't need 30 megapixels. 15 or 16 will just do for me. For this kind of work, it's more than good enough. And it's a great camera for high ISO shooting. Remember, quite often it's dark and you can't turn on the lights because there just ain't no lights in that facility anymore. Anyhow, so once you're there, look around and do your shoot. It is exciting, and try to imagine how it must have been when people were working there. And if you're having sufficient fantasy, try to hear the sounds of the people, try to hear the rumble of the machines, the smoke, the smell that might have been in that place. And quite often you can still smell it. And look especially at the light, because the light is everything in those facilities, especially in the one behind me or the one I'm in right now. Everything has been taken out. There is basically nothing left. Just the shell of the factory is still there. And still it is a very rewarding location because of the light. Now, typically those buildings are damp and dusty, or either one or both. And then when you have a bright day, the sun will come through the openings in the roof and you will get these nice rays coming down. And that's really neat for your pictures because it creates a certain atmosphere. So that's what I always try to look for, the light. You may have to go on different times of the day to have the right angle of the light. I went in this case very early in the morning during springtime, so the sun wasn't that high up. Anyhow, so when you're there, look around, do your thing. Now, this specific factory was a foundry. They were making steel construction and cast iron for a lot of big customers. It was built in the early 60s, and it's kind of amazing how I still found the old books and orders. It's all still there in certain places. So I took a few shots of that, but for the rest the factory has been robbed empty. There's nothing in it anymore. Some residues of pedestals are still there, and actually I still did find a few old molds, the molds they used for the cast iron, but that was about it. But still, it's kind of interesting to see how those folks used to work and under what circumstances they had to work, because these places must have been tremendously hot around the ovens in the summer, and in the construction place it must have been awfully cold with all the iron around in the winter, especially without heating. Oh, and there's one more thing I forgot to mention. Always take your tripod with you, because you're going to need it, because you will need longer exposure times.